If you want to see the real Penn's Landing, this is your landing spot, not Philadelphia.
When towns try to revive, especially around a historical event, there's a lot of tension at play.
There are these three places that, depending on what your question is, all could make claims to being Penn's landing spot. Newcastle is the first place that Penn lands when he reaches North America. Chester is the first place that Penn lands in what would become Pennsylvania. And then Dock Creek and the Delaware River is where Penn lands when he reaches Philadelphia. So there have been moments in the history of the memorialization of Penn's Landing where there are attempts to share the story.
So what they can do is they can bring it together and recognize that Chester is the real home spot.
Specific communities often have specific purposes for memorializing it, and again, some of it has to do with urban revitalization efforts and other things that make it harder, sometimes I think, for them to claim, for multiple places to claim the same honor.
What are we memorializing here in terms of Penn Landing? There's a whole other counter-narrative to the colonization of North America.
There's a misinterpretation of history. The actual landing is here in Chester, Pennsylvania, not Philadelphia.
Starting in the 17th century to the present day, the spot of Penn's Landing has been used by various entities to claim space. In Penn's time, that space was being claimed by English Quakers and English people, from Native people, from Swedish people. And so it had a specific meaning, and as a result, the specific spot where Penn landed was marked. In the 19th century, when the Penn's Landing Memorial was put up in 1882 on the bicentennial of Penn's Landing, you can look at the speeches, and the general tenor of those speeches is of America as a melting pot of mostly Northern and Western European Protestants, but a melting pot nonetheless. And it's seen as this moment where Chester is developing an industrial identity and growing, and so it's for kind of industrialists and capitalists and Americans whose descendants came from different parts of Europe to claim the space. In the 20th century, it becomes a little bit more complicated as different groups of, more groups of people attempt to claim the space. And I think in the 20th century, it has a lot to do with money. This happens in this shadow of I-95 being built through both Chester and Philadelphia. It has to do with the coming of the bicentennial, where funding from the state, and at times people are thinking national level as well as local level, is available for urban improvement projects and urban revitalization projects.
A lot of cities, especially when they're trying to revitalize, turn towards the historical preservation route. And it would be remiss to not notice that, of course, this was an important historical event.
This is where it all began. How many cities have this?
Depending on what question you ask, what answer you're looking for, different spots can kind of appear as the legitimate kind of heirs to Penn's legacy.
The whole issue of this Penn's Landing Memorial in relation to the well-known Penn's Landing in Philadelphia really kind of speaks to that relationship of big city, small city. And in essence, what we see here is a relationship that has a thread running through a lot of Chester's history, especially in relation to larger cities of Philadelphia in particular, but also the larger Delaware County. And race plays an important aspect of that, in the sense that Chester has always been, in essence, on the tail end of this relationship.
So the spot of Penn's Landing, and the idea of Penn's Landing, is used by both Chester but also Philadelphia to try to unlock anything from highway funding to funding from the National Park Service.
So in many ways, what you see here, and this kind of tug of war between where Penn's Landing actually is, speaks to this whole relationship of how the city of Chester has been kind of poor stepsister of that of Philly, and in relation, a lot of problem solving and also problem formation comes from its relationship with that bigger city. So there's always been this kind of relationship. It's been anything but symbiotic. In essence, what you're seeing here is that the marginal position of a lot of the folks, mostly a minority, especially after Second World War, and poor, puts them in a position of inequality and almost dependency in relationship to the larger city like Philadelphia.
We find the park today in pretty good condition in that they mowed the lawn at least for us. The city needs and has tried, but there's problems with the money, I think, situation.
Philadelphia has the money. Chester don't have the money. Chester doesn't have the money to put out like Philadelphia do. So we do a small one.
This is a very, very exciting day in the city of Chester. And thank you for coming out today so we can celebrate 336 years. And our 340th is going to be bigger and bigger and better than this one. Okay, look for a good time. And I'd like to thank Mr. William Penn for coming to visit us.
I'm delighted to be here on this auspicious occasion, the anniversary of my landing at this particular spot in October 1682.
There's a lot of things that, of course, are not going to be easily memorialized, but nonetheless are as significant, if not more, than his landing here.
Well, anybody that, to me, any of them that came to America and landed here in America were slave owners. Slaves came with them.
We were the first, okay? I don't have anything to do with what he did up there in Philadelphia. What I'm dealing with what he did down here in Chester. And Chester is the place.
When cities, small towns, choose a moment in history that can be memorialized like this, one of the more problematic things that can happen is that it lionizes that moment. It takes it as the moment in which this city is to be associated with. And the problem with that is that it's a moment frozen in time. A lot has happened, obviously, since William Penn set foot here.
The park at one time was beautifully decorated with benches and lights. All of that has been stolen or broken. I bring students down here and the grass is up over my knees, and I'm walking in here with 65 kids to do a tour, and I have to then explain to them what happened.
One thing that a lot of cities have regretted doing is to kind of turn their city into a kind of museum effect in which people come here to try to see something that was centuries ago. They
don't understand why people aren't important enough, or this site is not important enough to be preserved.
This is obviously a good starting point. Here it is. It obviously has historical significance. It's a moment in time. We can all agree that it happened here, and then move forward from there.
Chester's Penn's Landing will be bigger and greater than Philadelphia's Penn's Landings because we are working on it, and it's a work in progress. And so we will carry the history on.
In many ways, I think like a kind of people's memorial in terms of looking at how folks in Chester have wrestled with, again, this dynamic between the city and the county and the city and larger Philadelphia would be ideal. Whether they are actual physical markers or we live in a digital age, global, in terms of kind of web-based or online markers, that would be kind of cool, I think, as well. But again, I think kind of picking this moment and saying this was the real Chester, I always find that a bit problematic.
What is the future of Penn's Landing?
Oh, it's going to be great. It's going to be well known. Well known, and everybody going to respect us.
Well, God bless Chester, and God bless all of you. Thank you.
What can you tell me about the Shawn Museum?
Yes, I am.
The Shawn. I'm astounded. The Shawn Museum was a valuable space here in the city of Chester. And then suddenly it came to a halt.